What if I told you at some point in the past decade, the UFC had not one, not two, but three different reigning champions from the African continent? Kamaru Usman from Nigeria, Israel Adesanya from Nigeria, and Francis Ngannou from Cameroon. These three kings were the faces of an iconic era in the UFC. Yeah, I know, before you say it, Americans and Brazilians used to dominate all weight divisions in the UFC, blah blah blah. But I'm so sorry, those countries have a deep-rooted culture of mixed martial arts, unlike somewhere in West Africa, which had only Dambe and other lesser-known combat sports. You know, growing up in the 90s, WWE, WWF, WrestleMania, and all that wrestling stuff were all we had to watch on TV. We used to try all that 619, chokeslam, and RKOs on the playground. But deep down, we all knew that WWE was not real fighting. Then everything changed when I got into uni, and all my friends introduced me to something called the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Boy, those fights look real. There was blood all over the place. Some dude named Iceman with a crazy mohawk was smashing people and sending them into the shallow rim. Boy, this shit was insane. And that's how I got hooked on MMA and UFC. The rules didn't make sense, but I was just there to watch the violence. Back then, Africans were nowhere to be seen on the UFC cards. The closest was Czech Congo, who I thought was actually from one of the Congos until someone told me how he was from France. Czech Congo was violent, but he was never elite. Ramal Thierry Sekuja was the first Cameroonian to fight in the UFC, but after winning just one of his first three fights, the UFC cut him from promotion. Then came Jimmy Manua. He was the first fighter I ever saw carrying a Nigerian flag in the UFC. Jimmy Manua was a decent fighter with exciting fights and devastating knockouts, but he was never among the best of the best in his division. While Jimmy Manua was trying to climb the rankings, a young Nigerian wrestler was about to win the Ultimate Fighter Finale 21. His name was Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman, also known as the Nigerian Nightmare or Marty from Nebraska, was born in Auchi, Nigeria on August 11, 1987. At the age of 8, he moved to the United States with his family. Usman grew up in Arlington, Texas and attended Bowie High School, where he became a three-time Texas State wrestling champion. He then went on to wrestle at the University of Nebraska in Cannery, becoming a two-time NCAA Division II national champion. You have to ask Ben Askren, but somehow, Usman suddenly became Marty from Nebraska. Kamaru Usman tried to join the USA Olympic wrestling team in 2012, but his injuries kept him on the sidelines. I mean, we all know that his knees have always been a suspect. But come on, let's be honest here. Usman was never gonna make that super stacked Team USA roster. With the Olympic dream over before he even started, the next step was to turn pro as a martial artist. Kamaru went 5-1 on the regional scene before the UFC gave him a chance to fight at TUF 21. Kamaru dominated the field and won TUF 21 finale against Haider Hassan through a second-round submission. Just like that, Kamaru Usman signed with the UFC in 2015. Guess who Usman faced in his debut fight? Yep, the one and only Leon Edwards. Usman won the fight by unanimous decision. None of us could have guessed at the time, but it was the start of a trilogy of fights that gave us one of the most spectacular finishes in UFC history and a couple of iconic outliners. But let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. Kamaru Usman continued running through the division, crushing a few cans and making light work of world-class fighters. Some names on his kill list include Sean Strickland, Damian Maia, and then Rafael dos Anjos. At this point, Kamaru Usman was becoming a household name. He brought a lot of Nigerian MMA and UFC fans. He meant to us what Conor McGregor meant to the Irish. I still remember this clearly because I finally found people to discuss MMA with. On March 2nd, 2019, Kamaru Usman defeated Tyrone Woodley and became the first African king in the UFC. Nigeria had its first ever UFC king. Africa was no longer filling a quota in the UFC, and we were here to take over. The first challenger to Usman's throne was Colby Covington. Those two fights were absolutely goated because both of them hated each other. Boy, this was real hatred. You had to be there during those fight build-ups.
Absolutely. I don't remember you saying yes to them. Why are you lying to the people? That's why everybody hates you, because you're fake. At least I'm honest. I'm brutally honest, yeah, but at least I'm honest. Stop being fake. Stop lying to people.
I mean, come on. Who didn't want to punch Colby Covington's face? His fake tough guy act was so cringe. His fans are the scum of the earth. I'm just glad he's no longer relevant in the UFC. I know I jumped off the chair when Usman broke his jaw in the 5th round. That was the first title defense. Usman then made easy work of Jorge Masvidal on short notice before defeating former teammate Gilbert Burns in an exciting fight for the ages. Even with all these exciting title defense, yet fans, who are mostly Colby Covington fanboys, if we're being honest, still call Usman Marty Snoozman because of his wrestling and grappling. I'm not gonna lie, that nickname made me chuckle a few times, but his foot stomps used to drive fans insane back in the day. But everything changed during that rematch against Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal was riding the Street Jesus wave after the morale victory of going the distance with Kamaru Usman. So he went around convincing fanboys that he would starch Kamaru Usman now that he had a full camp. Well, surprise surprise, the full camp didn't help Street Judas. Kamaru Usman delivered one of the most perfect street right hand to knock Masvidal out cold. Man, he ended the hype train there and then. Kamaru Usman then went on to beat Colby Covington in the rematch. His star was at an all-time high. He was now close to beating GSP and becoming the GOAT of UFC welterweight division. But everything changed when he rematched Leon Edwards. Oh dear, I will come back for that later. 1 month after Kamaru became the welterweight champion in 2019, Israel Adesanya fought Kelvin Gastelum for a chance to become the second African king. Israel, the Last Stylebender Adesanya, was born on the 22nd of July 1989 in Lagos, Nigeria. He moved with his family to Ghana, then finally settled down all the way on the other side of the world down under in New Zealand. Adesanya didn't care about sports at first. He spent all his time watching Death Note and Naruto, but due to all the bullying he faced back then, he turned to fighting as a form of self-defense. Like most Nigerian millennials, Izzy's early fighting inspirations were Jackie Chan and Booker T.
Yeah, is that Booker T?
It is.
Five time.
We used to do all that snake in the monkey shadow and drunken master shit. Ah, good times. So after a few years of training and competing in Australia and New Zealand, Adesanya moved to China to pursue a career in kickboxing. This was the origin of Izzy the Chinaman. During his run in Glory Kickboxing, Izzy had only one KO loss on his record to some unknown Brazilian fighter. Now take a wild guess to who the fighter was. It was Alex Poatan Pereira. So it will be absolutely fair to say that Poatan ran Izzy out of Glory. I would definitely cover their legendary rivalry in another video. But for now, let's keep our focus on the Three Kings. After Anderson Silva started falling off and got popped for using PEDs, the middleweight division needed a new star. In 2017, Israel Adesanya signed with the UFC. He then went on an undefeated run before beating Anderson Silva in an emotional passing of the torch moment. With the UFC's blessing, Izzy's next fight was booked for the title, but we had to wait because Robert Whittaker, who was the undisputed champion, was injured. Izzy now had to fight Kelvin Gastelum for the interim belt. After a 5-round war with Kelvin Gastelum, Izzy became the interim middleweight champion. This fight is already in the UFC Hall of Fame. Bro, Izzy was so close to losing this fight, but I don't care. A win is a win. He showed that dog in him. Alright, enough of the jokes. Izzy later defeated Robert Whittaker in 2019 to become the undisputed middleweight champion. Just like that, he became the second African king. Just like Kamaru Usman, Izzy's reign was dominant and impressive. He basically cleaned out the division. Just check out the names on his kill list. Rob Whittaker and Marvin Vittori twice each, which in hindsight is not that impressive, but yeah. Then he beat Derek Bronson, Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero, and Gerard Cannonier. Those last two fights were as boring as fuck. But who cares? Anything you have to do to keep the belt. Izzy ruled over the kingdom of the UFC middleweights until 2022, when he faced off against arch nemesis Alex Poatan Pereira. But unlike Israel Adesanya and Kamaru Usman, who came from relatively middle-class backgrounds, the third African king, Francis Ngannou, came from the literal trenches to snatch the heavyweight crown. Francis the Predator Ngannou was born in Batié, Cameroon on September 5, 1986. Ngannou had little education and worked various odd jobs to make ends meet, shoveling sand for multiple hours daily at a sand quarry. Like refugees fleeing Africa for greener pastures in Europe, Francis Ngannou embarked on a gruesome journey that took him through Niger, Algeria, and Morocco before finally landing in Spain on an inflatable boat. After 2 months of detention in Spain for being an illegal immigrant, he finally made his way over to France. At first, Francis Ngannou wanted to become a boxer, but his coach convinced him to transition to MMA. But I still believe that Ngannou would have been a boxing world champion if he had focused on boxing fundamentals that early. But hey, life is not about ifs, buts, and maybes. After a few fights on the regional scene in Europe, Francis Ngannou signed for the UFC, and boy, did he start with a bang. The first victims of the Predator's rampage were Curtis Blades, Alistair Overeem, and Cain Velasquez. That's quite an impressive run, even though these guys were not in their prime at the time. But come on, who cares all about that? Francis Ngannou got the opportunity to become the first African UFC king when he faced Stipe Miocic in 2018. This was before Usman and Izzy got a chance to fight for their belts. Ngannou's lack of experience showed in the fight against Stipe because he gassed himself out trying to get a quick finish. But as we say in these parts, destiny delayed is not destiny denied. After getting fraud checked by Stipe, Ngannou lost his confidence. That performance against Derek Lewis almost convinced even me that Ngannou might actually be a fraud after all. But all the doubts made a perfect backdrop for an epic comeback story. You never count Francis Ngannou out. Back-to-back first-round finishes against Curtis Blades, Junior Dos Santos, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik convinced the UFC and fans to give Ngannou another shot at Stipe. The rematch was not even close. On the night, we witnessed the mythical patient Ngannou tear Stipe Miocic apart before finishing him with a brutal KO in the second round. I swear, I thought Stipe died in the ring after that KO. With that win, Francis Ngannou became the third king of Africa. Here's the thing about snatching the crown in combat sports. If you wait long enough, someone hungrier, faster, and younger will eventually snatch the crown from you. Father Time remains undefeated unless you cherry-pick your opponents like Floyd Mayweather. And just like the tales of old, the three African kings started to fall one by one. The first African king to fall was Kamaru Usman. After holding his welterweight crown for over 1,000 days, he got caught by a perfectly timed head kick from Leon Edwards. That head kick was... shit happens. The painful part of all that stuff was having to watch and listen to Headshot Dead over and over again. I swear, if I hear that shit one more time, how the fuck did Leon Edwards gain aura and Usman's head? This shit makes no sense. You think it couldn't get worse? Newsflash, it can. 3 months after Kamaru Usman got brutally KO'd, on November 13, 2022, Alex Pereira dethroned the second African king, Israel Adesanya, at Madison Square Garden. God damn, can we Nigerians catch a break? And then there was one king left. After a long-ass contract dispute with Dana White, Francis Ngannou left the UFC and signed with the PFL.
We kept trying to get this deal done with Francis, and then finally it just, we got to the realization that it wasn't going to happen.
On January 14, 2023, the UFC stripped Ngannou of his heavyweight title, officially ending the era of the three kings of Africa. Like every disposed king, Usman and Izzy tried to regain their belts. Kamaru tried to regain his belt, but his knees, man, they are hanging on by a thread. Why would he even take a short notice fight against Khamzat Chimaev of all people? This absolutely makes no sense. Thank God he's finally in the win column after defeating loudmouth Joaquin Buckley. I hope he makes one more run for the belt. Israel Adesanya was able to reclaim his championship belt after a hard-fought victory over his opponent Alex Pereira at UFC 287. I honestly believe that Israel Adesanya sold his soul to some Yoruba oracle to get that one win over Alex Pereira. His chin was a sacrificial lamb. But since getting the win over Poetin, Izzy has lost against Strickland, gotten into a wild beef with fellow African Duplessis, and gotten choked out by him and then lost to Nasruddin Imavov in devastating fashion. I can't catch a break, can I? This fight game is brutal, man, I tell you. Francis Ngannou briefly moved over to boxing to find two all-time greats. He narrowly lost to Tyson Fury before Anthony Joshua knocked the shit out of him. He's finally back to winning ways in the PFL after defeating Renan Ferreira. Now he's involved in some weird scam stuff after refusing to fulfill his promotional deal with the PFL. I don't want to get into that stuff, please. This man has been through a lot this past year. Although the era of the Three Kings is way behind us, their legacy lives on in the current crop of Africans in the UFC. It's just unfortunate that the old and new generations have to beef over unnecessary silliness. Seeing the racially charged build-up to the Duplessis vs Izzy fight left a bad taste in my mouth. And I don't understand why Manal Cap is trying to force a beef with Izzy to make a name for himself.
What you want to? What you want? Alright, yeah. Shut the fuck up. Sit down. Yo, things is...
You ain't that guy, little bro. When I contrasted with the current animosity with the brotherhood that existed between the three kings, it could make a grown man shed tears. Let's not forget how Israel Adesanya refused to fight Kamaru Usman even though Dana White wanted it to happen so badly.
I don't see myself ever fighting Israel. You know, even though a lot of people have kind of been hinting towards it, they're like, yeah, you guys need to fight, I don't see myself fighting him.
But anyways, the era of the Three Kings is solidly defined in gold in MMA's history books. For a brief moment, Dana White considered bringing the UFC to Africa to honor the legacy of the Three Kings.
And we talked about, what was the two? It was Nigeria, Rwanda were the two places that we're talking.
Dana.
Well, that ship has sailed forever now because no African has a belt. But sure, how about we promote power slap that no one gives a fuck about? Ugh, this man Dana White? I swear, although this vision of UFC Africa is now far from reality, I refuse to give up hope of seeing a UFC Africa event in a stadium in Casablanca, Cairo, or Cape Town. The success of the Three Kings has shattered the stereotype of African fighters being rash brawlers with no technique. MMA gyms have started popping up in towns and villages, just like the Dagestani mountains and Brazilian favelas. Kamaru now has his own promotion called AKO Show. And even though the new crop of African champions come to dominate the UFC later in the future, the Three Kings era will never be topped.